This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. My guest today on the podcast is Cory King, founder, owner, co-owner of Side Project Brewing in Maplewood, Missouri. We are here at the beautiful Spruce Point Inn Resort in Boothbay Harbor, Maine, overlooking the bay with lobster boats driving by us. So if you hear some noises in the background, that's what it could be, or sailboats or whatnot. Cory's joined us at the Brewers Retreat here, the Craft Beer and Brewing Brewers Retreat at Boothbay Harbor, and has just brewed 2 batches of beer with a group here. And what was the experience like brewing on a homebrew scale system, brewing one of your classic grisette recipes, with a group of 15 brewers?
No, it was great. They helped me more than probably I helped them to some extent on the equipment side, but it was good. I started as a home brewer, and so it was a beautiful, sophisticated homebrew setup that we made some beer on, and dialing our recipe down and actually trying to take grisette and make an inviting, flavorful, full beer that's 4% without the addition of oak, without the addition of acidity, was fun for me. And then we kind of discussed that with the brewers, and we had a good time. We missed our target gravity both days, but I think we're going to make a good beer nonetheless. It's going to be a strong grisette.
Okay.
Borderline what today's people would call a saison, but no, it was really good and relaxing and fun and easy.
Good.
Good. Really nice, very nice.
It's not often that you end up underestimating your efficiency by such a large degree and coming in so big.
Yeah, we were getting, I think, somewhere a little over 90% efficiency, which obviously we didn't plan on from the first day to even the second day, but it was really cool too to have the homebrewers in the group being like, oh, let's do this, like this is what I do at home. And I was like, this is great, I want to hear from you as well, because I don't do this. We don't brew on a pilot system right now, and it's been a while since I've brewed on a small system, and even then it wasn't this sophisticated. So I think that was great on their side, feeling way more involved than I was trying to get them as involved as possible. But yeah, it was good.
So when you say you were a home brewer, you made the jump straight into professional brewing from home brewing. Didn't attend brewing school in any official sense like that. Tell me about that experience of, how did you decide, hey, I'm just going to go do this for a living and convince someone to hire me, even though I've never brewed in a commercial brewing environment before?
Yeah, my experiences before working at a brewery, I tried to diversify myself, and initially it wasn't even a plan to be a brewer, but I was selling wine at the time, and I was a home brewer, and I had bartended before and actually left selling wine to manage a beer bar. So the idea was maybe when a new brewery opened up or a new brewery was looking for somebody, I could possibly jump right into the position of the everything guy. I could help run your tasting room. I could help do sales if need be, but I really want to brew. So I was very fortunate to go straight from home brewing to a small brewery called Perennial Artisan Ales when they were opening in St. Louis. I did stalk them, and I did bug them a lot for a job, don't get me wrong, but I did get the job without any professional experience, no internships, no schooling, professional brewing school, which I don't recommend any of that for anybody. You should definitely do something like one of those to make yourself more appealing for an employer. But I was very, very, very fortunate to get hired. But it was, I sold myself as, hey, I can do sales, I can do bartending, I really want to brew, and here's my home brew, and taste it and see what you think, and go that way. But yeah, I jumped straight in.
But you had an unconventional background in that you had an undergraduate degree in a science field and a graduate degree, a master's in business, if I recall. It's an interesting mix to come into the world of brewing with.
Yeah, my degree is actually in chemistry. Was not intended to be a brewer at the time. I found beer much later. Not much later, but the passion to become a professional brewer was much later. I have always liked the sciences. I've always done well on the science side. if you were to ever read any of our labels or any of our blog posts that are not written correctly, you'll know why. Like, my wife edits everything, and it's not that I'm bad at it. I'm just I'm not. They, my those people. They're great writers, and then the people that are just math they get, and I get math and science and chemistry. So that was my degree. I thought I was going to be a pharmacist for a while, and worked in a pharmacy for one summer and said absolutely not. But I continued on with my degree in chemistry, and so I didn't want to become a chemist, so I stayed in school and got my master's in business because I've always had an interest in business. Running my own business. I've had a couple of small, like you could call businesses back, when I was younger, doing eBay sales or whatever little things. But yeah, chemistry fortunately found its way into my life later on when I started brewing, and definitely made the more complicated aspects of brewing that not every brewer addresses, especially on the small scale, very easy for me to pick up on. And so I'm very glad. And then definitely doesn't hurt that I have an MBA, and my wife and I own our own business now. So there's some things that I still retain from that, and still paying off that education, but at least I'm using it.
Sure. What'd your parents say after you came in with an MBA and decided to go manage a beer bar and then become a brewer?
Yeah, so
that has to be a different expectation.
I was paying my own bills on that side, and they've always known me as pretty bullish. When I get an idea, I'm just going to do it. And so at first I was selling wine, so what could have been a career, and paying down debt and everything, and one day realized I just don't like this. And Karen, my wife, actually got the first job in the beer industry. She was bartending at a beer bar in St. Louis and met a regional sales manager for Goose Island, and so she was the first one, and she became the Goose Island rep for the area, and she was one of the first brewery reps in the St. Louis market. Now it's commonplace. You go to a market and go, every brewery has a rep, but she was like really the first brewery rep in Missouri at that time. And, I was like, I'm getting into brewery sales. I wanted to get into the sales side, and left my job at doing wine sales to work at a beer bar. And, later discovered that I wanted to, no, how about I brew? Actually kind of tired of sales. It's not my gig. How about I make the beer? Yeah.
I've spoken to a lot of folks who are homebrewers, and everyone asks the question, can you jump straight from homebrewing into professional brewing, or should I start a brewery as a homebrewer? Again, the question is, are you really ready for the business piece of it? But you become an object lesson for a lot of folks who might say, no, you need to go take these routes, work for other folks and whatnot until you get there. And you did the opposite. You went straight into, from homebrewing, and you did that, and you brought recipes to Perennial that came from your homebrewing days. And some of those recipes have turned into beers that are pretty big classics these days. Well respected, highly sought after, and you think that has anything to do with those homebrew roots and some of that experimentation, or?
Definitely. As a home brewer experimenting, you take a lot of risks, and fortunately, whenever I started Perennial, whenever we would scale up a recipe, there was no cutting corners. Like, the recipes look funny on paper as far as what most production breweries would ever do. Yeah. Because it's just like, this is inefficient. This doesn't, you know what I mean? It's just, this is going to be hard. It's going to be a long day. How about we make tweaks here, cut this here? We didn't do that. And, that's something to say about Phil and, Perennial, when we were bringing in some of these recipes, and Abraxas and Sump and, those barrel-aged versions of that came from that, came from just home brews. And yeah, they're not a model of efficiency, but it speaks for themselves, later in flavor. And that's why I think there's not a lot of other beers out there like that, because if people don't start maybe on the small scale where they're just taking crazy risks, and they only start maybe in a larger brewery or brew pub, they'll never push things that far. And then they never can create the flavors that are maybe that out of the ordinary. And that's what then thus makes the beer different, for sure. What
are some of those things? I guess low efficiencies and huge grain bills, long boils.
Yeah, just a pain in the butt to make. You hate it's maybe one thing if I was at the time the head brewer, and so I was writing the recipes, and then I was the one that had to do them. It's another thing to maybe write the recipe and hand it to somebody else and go, ha, have fun, make this. It may not it may never translate very well to where the brewer who's handed this asinine recipe has to be like the one that has to be there for 18 hours brewing it, where I was the one doing it because I wanted to see it through, and I wanted to make sure that the way it was is the way it will become. And that's part of it as well. I don't know.
So at the time, while you were head brewer for Perennial, you also concocted this idea for a side project, which you launched within Perennial, or within the same facility of Perennial. Was it an alternating proprietorship, or?
Yeah. So I actually never really concocted the idea for a side project. It wasn't a thought of like, hey, I'm going to start a brewery inside of here. Mm-hmm. I was wanting to make a lot more funky beer and experiment a lot, even more than in Perennial. Experiments a ton,
sure.
Even more than I was allowed to do at Perennial as the head brewer. I just kept wanting to do new things, and it goes back to me kind of being bullish. Like I said, I just want to do it, and I'm going to do it.
Sure.
So I started purchasing, like when Perennial would buy barrels, I'd buy an extra barrel or two myself and buy my own rack, and then on my own time, put some wort in barrels and do things myself on the back. Mm-hmm. Well, eventually you end up with a good volume of beer that you're kind of like, what are we going to do with this? And I had been bugging Perennial about, bottle conditioning and making some more funky beer and just kind of experimenting more. And I think, this goes to say again, like Phil saw the fact that even though we were doing a bunch of stuff, maybe I was even getting bored already, and they, were doing everything they could to like, well, how do we facilitate this? What can we do to make this fun and exciting again? And they kind of came up with the idea of like, well, you can just use our license and we'll create like a little you can create a sub brand, or sub idea and just release the beers through here. So that way, at least my work wasn't going to waste. What is somebody gonna do with 60 gallons of beer? I could never drink a whole 5-gallon batch of homebrew,
Right.
So let's at least do something with them. But they really weren't Perennial beers. They were things I was doing at after hours or before hours or whatever. Right. And that idea kind of, i.e. a side project, started, and it took off. It took off very aggressively and quicker than we ever can have anticipated. So, I would come in on the weekends, brew, experiment, play around, and then I started buying more barrels, making more beer, and then renting more space from them, and then making more beer. And I think eventually they probably were like, oh my God, we created a monster. Maybe we didn't mean for this to become that big.
Right.
But it just took off. And and side project was born out of that. And fortunately, people have enjoyed the beers and my weird take on beers since day one. So,
at what point did you decide to split it off from Perennial and take it in a different direction and become an independent business?
Yeah, so I had started looking for like maybe new barrel space or something. The original thought was maybe we would continue to make wort at Perennial off their system and move it to another barrel warehouse, and then still sell everything back through Perennial tasting room or what. We're just trying to figure out where we're going. But Perennial was growing, I was growing. It was just a lot going on, and we finally had that kind of discussion where I kind of went back to almost like a part-time role at Perennial, kind of just consultant base on their barrel program, just helping, obviously, because I was there every day still, because all my stuff was there too.
Right.
But everybody else would implement the process, if you will. Like they would rack the barrels, they would spend the time doing that, because that's tedious and time consuming, where I would just kind of consult on that. And so that was like step one, if you will, phase one. And then the next phase kind of was like, how about side project was being successful, where I could actually maybe just take all my salary away from Perennial if they would let me just even consult less, if you will, like,
sure.
and completely be free, needing my time to do whatever I needed to. So it was a kind of a gradual phase. It was never like black and white.
Right.
Until, was it the very first day of 2016 was like my last, so the last day of 2015 was my last day at Perennial, even though I still had beer there and barrels, but last day employed by them, where it had to kind of happen, like what was I going to do with side project? We kind of created this small behemoth, not a very big brewery by any means, but enough for one person to handle. And was I just going to let it, kind of just stay where it was? And like I said, I'm a bullish person. I'm like, let's do some more things. I want to make more beer. I want a bigger facility where I can make more barrel beer and experiment more. And that was kind of when we had to part ways, and I found a space in Maplewood and started planning the build out of a brewery, and not a big one, but a pretty small brewery. But we did 270 barrels last year, and we might do 800 this year, and that's about as much as we'll probably be able to do out of our facility, and I'm really happy about that.
Interesting. 800 barrels, and there's a sustainable business out of that.
Yeah. We grew slowly, if you will. We grew at a good pace. We never went to a bank begging for a ton of money that we couldn't pay back. You know, we're not debt ridden. We grew with our market, with what people wanted. We never just decided, well, let's start making 100-barrel batches of all this stuff and figuring out how to pay for it in the next 20 years. Like, no, I don't want that stress. I don't want that stress. And so we've just taken our time. And so we as far as a business model, we're different than what I was ever taught, because we really don't have any debt, and we just kind of are. If the market slows a little bit, we'll slow a little bit. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to sell beer to pay off banks and people. We don't have any investors. It's just Karen and I, and that's just kind of our business model on that. So we can enjoy it as opposed to stress about it. And I'm not a big stress. I don't like stress.
Yeah, it does seem like there are quite a few brewers today that are brewing similar styles of beer and are kind of in the similar philosophical mode as you are, who are choosing their own quality of life over simple growth and profit. That enjoying company, being able to travel, being able to to hang with other brewers and spend those experiences are valuable pieces of life, more so than just stacking another million on top of another million.
Yep. And exactly, because look at, we're up here in Maine for a couple of days, enjoying brewing small batches with enthusiasts and other professional brewers and home brewers, and I can get away. We're not worried about the next release. We're worried about when the beer's ready and what's the best beer we can possibly make. And I think that's for a sour producer, it has to be that way.
Yeah.
If we were we're debt ridden and we had to make a payment to a bank next month on a huge loan, who's to say I'm going to let a beer sit longer that could really need it, And we don't even really have a packaging schedule, because the beer, I don't know when the beer is going to be ready. We have an idea. I have an idea, but that's could be a gap of 2 months, and that's a big gap. So it's very different for our production thought process as opposed to most breweries, if you will. And it maybe, hopefully in the long run, just focusing on quality of life, us being happy. If we're happy, we're going to make better beer, really. We're enjoying what we're doing more, then that will be our sustainable model in the long run, hopefully.
To fill in some of the gaps, you've told me before that Side Project as a brand means all the beer touches wood, and all the beer is made by you. And those are the two kind of brand pillars of Side Project. But as you say, some of that beer is going to take its own time and do its own thing. In the meantime, out of this new brewery that you've built in Maplewood, you bring a few other kinds of beers, and you've created a different brand for that? Yeah.
So Karen and I wanted to create something inside of Side Project, and it's a brewery called Shared. It is actually owned by Karen, myself, and our brewers, and Tim Botchin, our designer, because it's a lot of work for him as well. Every time we make a new beer, he has to design a lot of stuff, and we wanted to, being small as we are, you can't just walk in day one and say, hey guys, we're going to pay you everything you're worth. Like, we want to do that, so we have to pay you as much as we possibly can and be smart about it at the same time. But here is how Karen and I, if we ever wanted to make more money or figure out about retirement stuff, is it's growing a business. And so let's make you part of Shared, and you're the chef. We see restaurants where the restaurateur owns everything, but the chef is really who does everything. So that chef leaves, and then that restaurant goes to crap, and that chef starts his own place. How do we facilitate that? Almost how do we facilitate a side project inside of Side Project, which gets really inception based. Exactly. Wow. Yeah. But so we created something else, and I like drinking pilsners. I like drinking non-barrel aged beer sometimes. So I also wanted this kind of project to start because I wanted to experiment with making other beers as well. But that's not Side Project. The Side Project doesn't have a hazy IPA. That's not Side Project.
Right.
And we wanted people to know that this is a different mindset. This is Tommy, which is one of our brewers who I worked with at Perennial Artisan Ales, who left to come work with us, and Brian. So Tommy Manning and Brian Ivers, and Brian Ivers is Karen's brother, so my brother-in-law, but he also was a brewer at Goose Island for a couple of years, and an electrical engineer. So the guy's these guys know what they're doing. So it wasn't that we just opened our doors up and said, we're going to start a business to strangers who are talented. These are friends. This is family. We trust them. We love them. They're amazing brewers as well. And how do we get you involved as well? How does this business our size pay you well enough? And this is it. We give them part of, the profits off the batches, stuff like that. So I think that's another reason why some people grow, is the fact that they want to. We're going to continue to give raises to our employees, and we're trying to create a good business now. It's a whole different mindset. But how do you continue to get raises to people over the next 10, 15, 20 years if they stay there the whole time without continuing to grow your business and selling more and affording, how do you do that? And we don't want to scare people off, but we also don't want to grow outside of this, So if they grow shared, they grow their, income, and we're just trying to figure out this whole new business model kind of thing.
Sure.
And if they ever leave, the idea is it's called shared. So if they ever do leave and they both want to leave one day and start their own brewery, anything they create, any beer name, any recipe, it's theirs. It's not ours. It's not side project / shared. It's I'm not keeping your recipe. That's not fair to them. And so we want them to take that, and we want them to go, brew it again. It's yours. Just because you worked for us doesn't mean I own it. And so we're that's the idea behind that too, and because both of them want that, so we want to facilitate their maybe just experimentation as well, their recipe formulation, and go. So it's different, but we're small and we can do a lot of different things.
Now, is that an equity stake that they have in shared, or is that a profit sharing based?
It's profit sharing based right now.
Okay.
If they stay long enough and decide, hey, I may never leave now, let's make it equity based. Let's make you part of this company. So when it comes time to retire, or however we're going to move on, or we haven't thought of succession plans yet, or all that stuff, but we should be a smart business as well. Make great beer and be a smart business. And we will do that. We didn't just hand over equity on for day one, but definitely profit sharing right now.
Yeah. That's it becomes a predictor that we see a lot out in the beer market. Some of the companies that have the hardest time ultimately retaining staff and being successful are ones that are not brewer owned, and that brewer ownership, now it's not a guarantee that a brewery is going to make great beer or be successful, but there's certainly a correlation between breweries that are brewer owned and the quality of the product and their focus on the quality of that product, which tends to then extend into success in the marketplace. I've had that conversation with a number of brewers who have left the places where they were at because they didn't own a stake of it, and the folks that started the breweries, they're not brewers themselves. It becomes hard to kind of build that relationship, not having an equity stake in the person, or the person who doesn't have an equity stake but is responsible for the product. It seems like a strange way for some of these breweries to build their businesses.
I agree, and I think that was more possibly of the old way. I think in today's world, there's breweries taking definitely a more, not even breweries, businesses taking a newer look at how do you get people involved in the actual business themselves. Big businesses, it's stock. It's you've done such a great job creating these things for stock, but breweries aren't that way. They don't have stock, but how do you reward and retain these people? You can't just expect that a small brewery where the owners end up making millions and they have a brewmaster or head brewer making, nothing that they're ever going to really retire off of, even because a lot of brewers aren't still well paid. But that person's really responsible for everything you're known for. Like that's, it's a weird, a weird shuffle. And so then business takes over as opposed to the idea of beer and brewing, where this is the talent and you now are telling them they're not worth it, technically. So how do you retain that? And so we're trying to at least and we know these guys want to leave. We told them to be very open with us, and we're trying to, while they're at least there, I think, and they're gonna make technically good bonuses, if you will, and we pay them out monthly on what the sales were, and their cut. and I think it's helping. I think they're happy, and they've told me they're happy, and now people will be like, I want a job there. Like, no, it's a little bit different, but this is how we're doing it as a brewery that's going to make 800 barrels of beer this year, and that includes shared.
Oh, that does include
shared.
That
includes shared.
Oh, that was my next question.
Yeah, that includes shared. So, that's at least how we're doing it now, and it's working very well, and I think we're going to continue for a while at least for the
Now you're even doing canned beers out of shared.
We are. So Brian and Tommy love some hops. I'm getting better with hops, and we've been experimenting around with a lot of the new hop varieties and hop techniques and stuff, and it's been a lot of fun because to me it's regression back to not knowing what I'm even doing, and it's been a while since I've got to do that. I have a pretty good grasp on our side project beers, and so this is fun where it's like, I don't know how we're going to do this today. Let's or how we're going to do this tomorrow. Let's figure it out. And the best way to get those hoppy beers in people's hands are proper packaging first and foremost, and making sure we're doing a proper procedure all the way into that point. And cans work the best for us. We have a mobile canner comes in that does a killer job. Yeah. And we test our beer all the way through for DOs and doing everything we possibly can to make. If we're going to make any kind of style for you, we're going to do it the best we can, even though we're tiny and we're not an IPA house. Right. But here's our IPA, and I promise we tried really hard on it. So, the hoppy beers, our hoppy cans have been going very well. So they usually last a day, and that's about it. And we're making 20 barrel batches, which net for us, and our dry hopping rates anywhere from 13 to 15 barrels. So we're losing quite a bit of beer, which I don't know how you guys out there that make only IPAs, I don't know how you're doing it, but I'm glad we have the side project beers on the other side that really are what our bread and butter are. So
have you tried the lupulin powder cryo hops to help up that yield?
Not yet, and actually want to. We stocked up on right before we opened. I stocked up on enough hops from friends, other brewery friends that have extra hops, and it seems like actually hops are available now, kind of, except for the super special hops. So we stocked up on a lot of hops, and we've been just using those right now. But the cryo powder is something we'll probably play with at some point for sure. We just haven't done it yet.
Yeah, I guess with 800 barrels, you don't have to do a lot of contracting. It's pretty easy to find that on the spot market. Yeah.
We're going to continue to spot market it and / friends, like people at the end of the year going, oh God, I got 300 extra pounds. Like, I'll take 2 boxes of 88 pounds, like we just don't use a lot. That's a good, with us making maybe one hoppy beer every other month, we'll probably eventually get to one a month. So about 12 releases a year, and it's fun, and we're learning. We're definitely learning a lot about hops and their expression and our dry hopping processes and different yeast strains and their interactions with and stuff like that. So it's fun though. But they're going, and Brian and Tommy are killing it. Tommy just released his first double IPA this Saturday while we were up here, actually, called Tommy Fresh. Right. And it's a Parks and Rec one of the sayings on Parks and Rec or whatever. And I'm not hip on pop culture, but a lot of people got it, and so it's cool. And that's one of the fun things too, is shared. We can have quote unquote a little more fun, not necessarily not that side project's not fun, but we can goof around a little bit with the shared stuff, and it's been it's been great.
What was the genesis of your interest in mixed culture, wood aged, wild fermentation? You don't make spontaneous beers necessarily, but you've definitely cultured native bugs and microflora. What was the genesis of that? How did you decide, as many years ago as you did, to start making beers like this?
Selfishly, it's almost the best way to put it. Like, we in the Midwest, and especially in Missouri, there wasn't sour beer that was available. Karen and I travel a lot, and when we'd go out to like Colorado or the West Coast, if you went to the good beer bars, you could find Russian River. You could find Russian River maybe on draft even, and I was jealous. I was like, because Vinny and Natalie are amazing people, and fortunately over us making sour beer now, like, we know them, and it's been really cool to admire their business model as well. And I think you and I even talked about that earlier today. But you could get sour beer, you could get it, and anything that was sour in Missouri, outside of La Folie, which I absolutely adore and love as well, was a special release per se, and it was gone immediately. It was the go get it today or it's gone, and so I couldn't drink it. And I fell in love with sour beer, and that's probably a lot from my wine love as well. A lot of wine drinkers will tend to gravitate towards sour, funky wild beer. So I selfishly was like, I'm going to make my own then. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make my own. And so I started trying to just figure out what I would do. If I was going to make funky sour beer, how would I do it? Saison seemed to fit. Saison can be very Chardonnay, white wine expressive, and that was what I wanted to go for. And, then you start researching how was old Saison made. And it was, sometimes even blended with lambic, or it was still, inoculated with the local microflora, but they hopped it to try to reduce acidity, but it was still a small beer and it was tart, and you're just like, ideas start flowing, so how would we do this? What would we do it? And so as a home brewer, I had already, isolated some funky bugs cultures that I'd been playing around with years. And so once I grew into a professional brewery, my ideas for perennial, a lot of them were actually funky stuff too. And it got outside of the realm of, what I could convince them to let me make. And that's how Side Project started. Because I was like, I want to make this. This is funky. This is different. This is sour. And yeah, so it just kind of grew from there. It wasn't available.
Yeah, sure. Were there other influential beers that you'd tasted in your travels other than Russian River that just said, hey, this is the stuff that that clicks with me and my palate?
Well, there wasn't a lot at the time, not gonna lie, and so it was my early sour beers that I would always try to trade for, because I was a big trader too. I mean, you can't make good beer if you never drink good beer. Was really a lot of the Russian River stuff, and then the old Corked and Cage La Folies, and those were the initial things. I remember back in the day the old old Captain Lawrence stuff, like Rosa Imeron,
right,
and like the Ithaca Brut and Le Bleu, which are different takes for sure. And those were like the early sour beers I probably ever. And Red Poppy, loved Red Poppy. Anytime I get Red Poppy, and so yeah, whenever at least it was opening my eyes to other beers. And Goose Island started making the Sour Sisters, the Juliet, Madame Rose, and Karen was working for Goose, and I think some of those were like 2009, I believe, was when that started. So but yeah, that was the kind of the just trying to find sour beer, and then of course once you find lambic, you're kind of screwed. You're like, all right, now all I want to drink, now all I want to drink is lambic that it can't even get.
Right.
But that took a while.
Yeah. So
yeah, once I still love that. The first lambic anybody ever has, like, this is sour beer, and you talk to any lambic producer and they're like, sour? No, not sour beer. Brettanomyces beer. I'm like, oh well, the first time we all drank it was sour beer. Yeah.
Sure. Now, speaking of lambic, you've engaged in a program to blend beers, in the method that Goose has blended multi-year blends to achieve both a deeper flavor, complexity, as well as bringing in that brightness from young beer. Tell me a little bit about that. What your inspiration is behind that?
So with any, I think, sour producer, funky producer, you have to blend. I could never. Our beers would not be as good if I wasn't focused on blending as much as I am. And I want to almost say that I think I'm a maybe better blender than I am a brewer, just because that's where the magic happens, is picking the pieces. But yes, we released a beer this year called Just Blended 2017, and it's a 3-year blend. But outside of that, that's almost the only thing it has in common with a Goose. I've done some turbid mash spontaneous cool shit beers. Nothing's really, outside of a very, very small batch stuff that I've released here and there, nothing's really turned out to the level of what I think is Side Project and that I would release. So this one is a 3-year blend, but every year was inoculated with Missouri bugs that I'd caught spontaneously from 4 years ago.
Sure.
So but it was selective. It's the select.
Right.
It's how our business has gotten where it is. Our brewery's gotten where it is. It's selectively harvesting. The best barrel makes it to the next 4 barrels, which becomes the best barrel. That becomes the next 8 barrels or however. And it is a blend of old and new, 3-year blend of one year was. It's confusing for most people because I'm like, all right, 1 year I did turbid mash, but I used pellets. The next year I did a step mash, but I used aged hops. The last year I just did a single infusion mash with pellets, and then I blended all 3 years together, and then people online are like, that's goozy, and like, but it's not. It has nothing to do with the goose at all, because it's just a 3-year blend. If I blended 3 years of stout, you wouldn't go goozy. You know what I mean? Because it's because it's a stout. Like, I get it. It's a funky beer. That's a 3-year blend. And it turned out probably one of the more beautiful beers that I think I've made ever, and people have really enjoyed that. But yeah, I'm trying to dig deeper now that we're having older stock, And I think our younger stock is even more beautiful than ever because our process is even more honed in now. I have my own place. We're brewing on a schedule. Not brewing nights and weekends and just kind of on whims and just trying to figure out how to make wort. Now we're like, let's focus on everything. So they're turning out all right. I think there's a bottle in your fridge. I think it's a 375. Nobody got a nose the other night.
Oh my goodness!
It's on the top shelf. We'll have to dig in. Yeah. Okay. I'll have to show you where they are.
I have to pause this and go grab it right now. No, I think that's an interesting one. I mean, we've had a conversation this year as the Method Goose piece came out that Jeffrey and has been pushing forward. And there's certainly a question there whether an adherence to a process is more important than the end product that you produced from that. And it does seem like there are folks on different sides of the fence on that one, and that both can make great beer, but it seems like making great beer is more important than simply adhering to a rule around some sort of process for you.
Yes, absolutely. If you just heard my last blend, like I'm experimenting with processes because my bugs do different things than what would happen in Belgium or in Texas or up here in Maine like my bugs do different things, and what do they need? And if what they need doesn't adhere to the Method Goose Lambic category, that's okay. It's just I'm trying to make the best tasting beer and still be side project. I still do, like I said, turbid mash, cool ship, inoculated aged hop beers because those are great pieces for blends for me. I just haven't had any come out yet other than one, which we called Vintage 2014, that was really two small barrels that we bottled that were good enough, I thought, by themselves to be released as is. And so technically they would have been like Method Lambic, however you want to say. I'm building pieces. As a blender, sure. You're always building pieces, and we brew a lot of beer where the guys are like, what are we even brewing today? And like, it doesn't have a name. We're building a piece. Like, I just have this feeling I want to do this, let's try something new here, or just random things. And then later that's why we have the beer called Pulling Nails, which is a blend of a lot of things, and It's been a lot of fun to experiment. Or we have like Blended 2017, which is a little more focused of a blend. I knew going in what I was trying to accomplish.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about stouts. You do a lot on the mixed fermentation side, but you make a couple stouts out there too. Not a whole lot, but
stouts are a pain in the ass to make. There's no way around it. At least the size we make, the size of these beers that I like to make. I have a sweet tooth. I'm not gonna lie. I also love bourbon. I love whiskey. I love scotch. I love some pretty bold flavors. So I make delicate saisons that are 4% up to 15% bourbon barrel aged stouts that see oak for 2+ years, and those stouts. I think a lot of people know Side Project only for stouts, and there's a lot of people who know Side Project only for our fruited sours. And I really enjoy our stouts. They're just really hard to make, so we only have about 5% of our production are them. And I guess our famous ones are derivation. So we do derivation, and every blend is unique, and we treat our stouts just like we would a sour beer. I brew 7 or 8 different stout recipes, put them in different barrels, age them for different times, and then when we come back and it's time to make a new derivation, it's actually a blend, and it's not always the same recipe, not always the same barrel, and it's a picking of the best pieces for the puzzle, which I don't think any other stout producer is doing. And that may say something to the love that our fans have for our stouts. They're definitely very unique, and they're definitely side project at the end of the day, which I'm happy about.
Yeah, and then you've not shied away from going full pastry stout on some of these with.
No, exactly, and I love the term pastry stout now. Because like I mentioned, or you mentioned, Abraxas was one of my homebrew recipes, and so it's been something that's been around for a while now, and even before that, Hunapu, and I think even before that, the variants from Goose Island. I'm a Midwest guy, so we saw the Goose Island, the original Goose Island, the Bourbon County coffee with the Black Cat espresso, the very first year ever that came out. I was like, that was the best beer I'd ever had at that moment. Loved it, and that's the start of what's next. Okay, we can put coffee in this, so what can we do next? And I don't get too extravagant. I do add special ingredients, but I don't add 8 ingredients, and we also try to showcase our base beer. I've not shied away from here is derivation, and there's no adjuncts, guys. This is what happens with beer, barrel, and time, and I'm not hiding from anything, and I want other breweries to do that too. Before you sell me your stout that has 18 adjuncts, can I try the barrel-aged version that doesn't have any? And it is easy to kind of hide some things behind them if that's their motive, and I want more now of a pushback to straight barrel-aged stout, but our fans and consumers love the fun ingredients, and I love making them. So I even said that in our last blog post when we did Derivation 7. It was 2 years bourbon barrel aged stout, and we're having that tonight at the beer dinner. And there's no adjuncts in it at all. But when we released it, we told people like, hey, in a world where pastry stouts and adjuncts are everything, and I said in quotes like, I'm as guilty as anybody. I love them.
Sure.
I want you to drink this though, and I want you to taste. Here is vanilla and coconut and almond and char and smoke, and I didn't add any of those. That's why we first fell in love with this style.
Right.
So if let's remember that, and we'll probably go back that way. It's kind of the IPA thing, where we all got too hoppy for a while, and now everybody's going back. Like I want flavorful hops, and I want citrusy hops, and I don't want all that bitterness. And we might go back to where like I don't need marshmallows jammed in my stout. I can drink this barrel-aged stout that has notes of marshmallows by just being in a barrel. So
I hope we can get to this point where people can agree to not put the fruit into the IPA anymore and can simply get that fruit flavor out of the hops themselves. And they're getting there.
I think so.
Possible.
I think there's been a regression on that, hadn't there? Where it seemed like every day there was a new fruited IPA, and I think that kind of slowed.
Right.
Because the guys that are making tasty IPAs don't add fruit. Like you're doing it so well with just hops. So.
God help us. I hope that's the future, at least for my own sake. But
me too. Like I said, I selfishly make beer for myself. So, yep, I agree.
Well, so these derivation stouts that you make, because of the ridiculously small production of those stouts, they tend to command huge premiums on the trading market. There's even quite some aftermarket sales of those. And I know you've publicly expressed some frustration with how that works. Talk a little bit about about why you don't like watching secondary markets and folks reselling your beer. I mean, they're obvious as it is illegal. First and foremost, I mean it is illegal.
Yeah. It's I love trading. I was, like I said, I was a beer trader. Please trade the beer away. I mean, if you want to share it with a friend from across the country, please feel free to trade it. When it comes to selling, it's tough. Like I said, I have a wine background, and if you had a winery that you were a fan of for years and their secondary market price just all of a sudden skyrocketed, you know what they're going to do next year? They're going to sell their wine at that secondary market price, and they're going to go to a club membership only, and their bottles are now $500 a bottle when last year they were $50, but they have this cult following now. And then it doesn't scare off, but I couldn't afford to pay for that, and I was a supporter of you for years, but all of a sudden now you're popular and you're going to charge astronomical prices for your wine, as a business person should. Let's get outside the fact of you're just trying to support your regulars. What's to say that if we were a winery as a brewery, I would just take all of the derivations and sell them online to members for $1,000 a bottle? That's just asinine. But that's where people almost push the market. They're taking what the demand is and the lack of supply, and then they're reselling. And I got out of wine for the snootiness of it, like that side of the wine where it's like I can't afford these great wines anymore. And there are great wines at even lesser prices. But it seemed snooty, and I didn't like that. I didn't like how it felt. And then there's always that expectation, too. If you're opening up a $500 bottle of wine, you have a $500 expectation.
Sure.
Now, was that $500 placed on it by the winemaker, who then maybe I trust a little bit more? Or was it placed on it by a secondary person going, look, I have one of 100 bottles. Ha, ha, ha. I charge $500 for it. I don't want somebody to have their first experience with Side Project where they purchased a derivation bottle for $1,200 online going, I really, really like that, but would I pay $1,200 for it? And like, no, but would you pay $35 or $40 for it and $50 on site? I'm like, yeah, of course I would. Then I want that reaction. You know what I mean? Because that is the reaction. That is what we sell it for. Not $1,200. So I want that people's expectations become jaded when they're opening up something like that. And I still think they would love it at $1,200, but maybe they wouldn't. It's a lot of money. I don't have that kind of money, and so I don't want that to change their perception of our beer. Going, this was great, but maybe it should have been 200. Well, you know what? I didn't put that price on it. I didn't control that, and it's tough to create something and then not control it all the way through, right to the person's mouth, and that's why we don't distribute, and that's why we sell almost everything on site at our places, where we can control that from brewing to your mouth, like every aspect of the experience, because I'm maybe anal about that. I don't know.
And I think having some of that availability in your own tap room, where people know that they can go buy a bottle of that for $50 in your tap room, might diminish some of those aftermarket sales. I mean, rather than spending $1,000 on your bottle, I can buy a plane ticket to
absolutely
to St. Louis and pop over there and
for cheaper,
for quite a bit. Buy a couple of plane tickets.
And then we'll have when we're doing that, if we will have cases on site, and so we will do derivation on site usually when we release a new batch for probably 2 or 3 weeks. Because the first couple days are just packed with people want to try it, but it's like we make sure that it's available, and it is cheaper for you to come enjoy it here. Now, I get it, you're not putting it in your cellar, not aging it for a couple years and sharing it later. I get it, but at least you're drinking it, and that's why I make the beer. And sometimes our beer, I want maybe you to drink it. I don't package it, I don't bottle it till it's ready to drink. So I want you to drink it fresh too, especially if these beers have been in barrels for 2 years already. I can't promise it's actually going to be better in a year or two.
I'm sure.
Sure. And I get it, but with stouts, everybody's like, oh, this is like an age indefinitely. Like, maybe it can't. And I like it now, so I would really like you to enjoy it now, for sure.
You say that, and I think you're right. Like, this age indefinitely idea with barrel-aged stouts, it may be a complete misnomer. Most of mine stay in the refrigerator because, anytime you put it in a barrel, as we saw with Goose Island and Bourbon County, there are a lot of bugs out there. We know a little bit about a little bit of them, but there's a whole lot more out there that we're starting to discover, as people do these things with their beer. And now we can find lactobacillus that can, withstand 14% alcohol. And like, how the hell did that thing exist before? And all of a sudden we find it.
Exactly.
And that creates a risk, especially if you're sitting on a bottle that you paid $1,000 for. I couldn't imagine leaving that in an unrefrigerated cellar and wondering what the heck is going to happen to it. I can imagine if somebody bought that and spent that on it and something went south with it, they'd be pretty pissed, and they'd probably be pissed at you for it.
Absolutely. It'd be my fault. It'd be my fault. It's like, I didn't place that, but actually it would still be my fault. It wouldn't be my fault for $1,000. It'd be my fault for the price of the bottle. But there are going to be a heightened level of upsetness with me over $1,000 over, as opposed to, like I said, a $40 bottle or whatever. And so that's part of that game. It's part of that game, but fortunately, if you do get a side project, bottle, we stand behind everything because it's such a small batch. There's 100 or 200 bottles of any of our stouts that are out and even floating around, and to say half of those are probably consumed early on, so there's half of that floating around. If somebody had a problem with it, it's like, well, we can take care of this. It's not a Goose Island issue where I can't imagine how many bottles they had to deal with, which, unfortunately, Bourbon County Stouts, one of my favorite stouts. Love that beer. Every year it comes out. Like, give me some.
Absolutely. Politics aside.
Yeah.
So, all of us who have children hate to have to pick between them, but the beers you make, what are your favorites?
I love this question. It is really a hard question. I do always try to answer it, but it is a hard question because I am such a small brewery that is focused so much on just each individual project, if you will, that it's not like we had one take off that I continue to pump out for to pay the rent just because, like, we only make specialty beer, if you will. It is that. But I always have a soft spot in my heart for Fuzzy. Fuzzy really put us on the map for our fruited sours. We won a gold at Fobab up in Chicago. It was, the name even wasn't that thought out. Fuzzy's kind of whimsical for side project if you looked at other names, but it once it took off at Fobab, we're like, well, we can't change the name now. So I always have a soft spot in my heart. Saison Du from Ye, if I had like a flagship, that might be it as well, because that was our very first Saison release. Kind of once again also put us on the map for our Saison production. It's a spelt Saison fermented and aged in Chardonnay barrels. It's a traditional barrel fermented beer with our bugs. It's kind of what we are. It is what side project kind of is behind on that. And as far as, maybe my favorite, I love drinking beer de pay. Like, as do you. Beer de pay and grisette are two of my favorites, and it's.
I think you're just saying that to me.
I am. No. But like I said, beer de pay and grisette. If you ask anybody, I drink more of those of our own beer because they're 4%. Right. They're what they're meant to be. They're exactly what they're meant to be, and you can't say it's not a favorite if I drink more of it than anything else. Right. So those, and then I love every one of our stouts. I love all of our barley wine. I love all of our sour beers. I really do. It's really hard to pick one. It's just a matter of what each one's done for me. So maybe that's selfish too. Like, thanks Fuzzy, thanks Dude Fermier. You put us on the map on these things. Thanks Derivation. But I do enjoy all of them. And
what's the next beer that you're excited to brew?
Oh, excited to brew? Brew is one thing, release is another, because we brew something now, it may not come out for 2 years.
Oh goodness, that's some delayed gratification.
It is, but we're getting ready to rebrew Lengst. So Lengst was our bourbon barrel aged Adam beer, which I'm really excited for. I thought that just turned out absolutely beautifully. It really, really great beer. It's more to style than a lot of our other beers, honestly, and I think that it's just a beautiful look into what bourbon barrel aging can do to other styles, and especially like these little more obscure styles that not everybody's really familiar with. And it's been fun to educate people kind of on that. And obviously, it's a nod towards Adam, the Adam beer of Hair of the Dog, which Alan makes just awesome malty beers, and I like some malt too. So really, really fun beer. So we're getting ready to rebrew that. I'm trying to think what else I'm trying to go else on the brewing schedule. Actually, we don't schedule a lot of things out. I don't schedule a lot of things out because it's kind of like, what can we do? When can we do it? When do we have barrels? When do we have oak open? But we're getting ready to re-release Fence Row, our black raspberry sour, which is really exciting because a lot of people, it tends to be one of their favorite ones, even though it's been such a small release. And this one's finally going to be a larger release where people can get it. So that's kind of a fun beer on the horizon for at least release-wise. So I'll have to send you some for sure.
Oh, fantastic. Cool. Well, I think that's all I've got. Thank you, Cory, for joining me on the podcast here, Craft Beer and Brewing Podcast. Again, coming from beautiful Spruce Point Inn in Booth Bay Harbor, Maine. Thanks for joining us for the event. Thanks for brewing with the crew, and we're going to have a fantastic dinner this evening.
Of course. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Always. Thanks, Cory. This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.